Thanks for sharing your garden with us. And right now we're going to be talking about one of my favorite all-time topics, which are bulbs for the garden. And we're going to be talking about not spring bulbs, but things that will last into the summer and provide real bursts of color for you in those hot summer months. My guest is Chris Weisinger from southernbulbs.com. Welcome back to Central Texas Gardener, Chris.
Thanks, Tom. It's always an honor to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. You're pioneering the use of heirloom varieties of bulbs. You go out and collect these things from all sorts of sites.
Yeah, and that continues to go on. More importantly, we're putting it in the hands of lots of other growers now across the state. So lots of regional growers growing these for us, and we're just getting them out to the market.
Well, the plants that we're going to be talking about today are really special because they, in a lot of ways, brighten up the summer gardens, and they're so dependable, too. And I've been struggling to put my finger on what is it about bulbs that makes them so alluring to gardeners and to people in general, because they are. It's a different category of plant that people tend just to fall in love with.
Yeah, well, you know, I've fallen in love with them, absolutely. And I was sitting in the airport this morning getting here thinking about that exact question, you know, why is that? And for me, they mark seasons. They tell me when they're coming up right now that spring's almost here. And in the summer, the blooms look summer, they smell summer. So, you know, for me, they are the quintessential essence of the changing of seasons, and bulbs capture that like none other. And then more importantly, they're so darn tough, though, and that's why, so they're always there to remind us of that. And then they just pop up like old friends and bloom, even when you thought they were long gone.
Yeah, and I like the analogy of like old friends, and that's, I know I think of a lot of plants in the garden that way, and I'm sure other folks in the audience relate to that. And we remember them from our childhood. We remember them from when we started gardening as adults. These are the dependable plants that have been with us, traveling along with us, just like an old friend. And they do survive all the horrible conditions that Texas throws at them. And this past year was one of the worst.
Oh, it was.
One of the worst droughts on record. 2 deep freezes in the wintertime. Yeah. And yet, these are plants that will survive all that.
And a lot of them are going to survive. A lot of people lost some plant materials that we've been able to get away with for a long time. Yeah. And some bulbs that we were pushing the envelope with. But these old tried and true heirlooms, a lot of them are going to pop back up, and they're going to be really shocked when they bloom this spring.
Right. Well, let's start off by giving people an idea of some of the different ones that are available. And a lot of these, of course, you carry. One plant family that has really kind of had a renaissance in the past 20 years are Crinums. Yeah. This was, I think, probably a forgotten plant family. Just kind of relegated off to the corners of, you know, grandma's garden. Yeah. But they've really come on, and for a lot of different reasons. Big show, big bold plants for number one. Yeah.
And big bulbs. I mean, we have some that are the size of soccer balls out there in the barn. But then the blooms are just large trumpet amaryllis-shaped blooms. I mean, they are in the amaryllis family. And you get those big shows and that bold texture even after it's been 10 degrees like it was here in Austin and a huge drought over the summer. Yeah. You just don't find that toughness in a lot of summer blooming plants.
Yeah, and these are plants that, as you indicated, they have that trumpet-shaped bloom. They arrive on the top of a tall stalk and come out in beautiful sprays, sometimes as many as 20 or 30 blooms on each stalk. And there are a number of different varieties that we wanted to highlight. Mrs. James Hendry is one, and this is one that you think is an all-star plant.
Well, it is the favorite among a lot of connoisseurs. I mean, it'll start blooming in May, and it'll keep on blooming sporadically throughout the summer, and then bloom again in the fall. So you'll get 4 to 6 blooms from it. And the trumpet has the edges of it, they furl back, so you have a really open trumpet and a really nice fragrance. Yeah, it's a blush. It's a blush color.
Okay. So it's a pastel kind of color.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ellen Bosanquet. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly.
Well, Scott Ogden, who's a native of Austin, he aptly pointed out in his book it would be Bosanquet.
Bosanquet. Okay.
Yep, and it was named after an Englishman's wife. Okay. It blooms in the middle of summer. Dark pink, almost burgundy blooms, 2 to 3 blooms, and it's it's a tough plant, and you'll find that in a lot of gardens, and that is one that we carry.
Yeah, and I think that's one I have. I might have that one in my garden. I'm not sure. I had a couple of different varieties, a beautiful pink, and then one that's kind of reddish purple.
Yeah, that's it. Probably that really dark. And there's the lighter pink, lots of lighter pink varieties out there as well.
Yeah, and then okay, I have difficulty with this Powellii.
The Powellii.
Powellii.
Yeah,
okay.
And that's one of the lighter pinks. But then there's a solid white, which is a really traditional solid white bloom. Yeah, I was in England and installed at the Chelsea Physic Garden.
Okay.
Blooming nicely, so it's been around for a really long time. Very Victorian flower.
Yeah, a lot of these have that kind of sense of being Victorian plants.
And you find a lot of 1890s introductions, a lot of late 1800s and early 1900s introductions.
Yeah. And so the pink and white forms of that one.
The milk and wine, very popular.
Yeah.
Crinum herbertii is one of those.
Yeah.
Yep, you'll find those a lot of ditches and a lot of old gardens.
See them all over town here in Austin, in the old sections of town anyway. And there's one called Summer Nocturne as well, and this one sounds like it would be a real performer for us.
It's neat because it doesn't start blooming until late summer, and it goes all the way into the fall. I mean, one of the original names was almost autumnalis.
Yeah.
And a nice fragrance, and it multiplies in the ground, so it doesn't take long for you to go from one bulb to many.
Yeah, and that's another joy of gardening with bulbs.
Oh, absolutely.
Being able to pass them along to friends, share them,
and then you start having so many that, you know, since my company started 5 years ago, there are hundreds of little people who've had their bulbs propagate so much in the yards that they want to become bulb farmers themselves. So
be careful.
Well, I'm working with them now. I'm working with them. We're saying
okay,
yes, because I'm traveling doing these kind of things.
Right.
So I said, absolutely, grow them, and we'll market them. You know, we'll help you.
Good. Well, another plant family we want to highlight are the Hymenocallis, and people call these spider lilies. There are a lot of different things that people call spider lilies, but this is another big, robust plant. Tall spikes for the blooms, and the flowers are amazing.
Yeah. Now, that's actually, people get really confused because in the northern parts of the South, spider lilies refer to the red, like chorus. So in the Gulf Coast, white spidery blooms just, they unfurl in the most elegant fashion, and they bloom in some shady areas.
Yeah.
In the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Almost like fireworks going off. It's like pure white fireworks going off, and they sort of trail off with their, in the dark.
A beautiful central cup of white, and then the long petals that come out from that. Absolutely glorious. And one of the things that I like about this plant is, you mentioned it, I think in light shade it will perform. A lot of bulbs require sun, but this is one that can converge a little bit into the shade.
Yeah. We're so used to begonias as the only bulb for shade, but this goes into the shade.
And this is a plant, too, that there's a native form, right?
Absolutely. I picked up Berlandier's expedition. He was a French explorer, and he explored Texas, and he had kept a great documentary of his travels. And I was reading about his exploration from San Antonio all the way up to Rusk, Texas. And they talk about a scene where they're walking across a field where all of a sudden they find themselves surrounded by knee-high white spidery blossoms, the blooms, and they believe it's the native Hymenocallis liriosme.
Yeah. So the early European explorers, noticing the bounty of what was here in Texas.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to picture where that was, but I think this is a plant that likes kind of wet feet sometimes.
Blooms in spring.
So maybe river bottom somewhere.
Probably around Bastrop River Bottom area, and it's just
kind of fun to picture.
Yeah, and it's a connection to our past. Bulbs are a connection to our past.
Yeah. Another plant family that we don't want to be remiss on are the rain lilies, and these are super tough little survivors, and especially for xeric conditions.
Yeah, I mean, they almost love just being popped in between rocks and rock gardens and areas in Austin. They love those conditions, and there's lots of rain lilies on the market, and there's no way we could do 3-5 hour segments on rain lilies and not touch them all. But one of the most traditional and the largest pink blooms, which should deserves all the attention that it gets, is the Zephyranthes grandiflora. It doesn't set seed, but it makes a lot of bulbs out of its base, and it'll bloom 4 to 6 times.
Yeah, and big bright color too.
very, very happy
Yeah.
plants. I
Yeah.
mean, burst of this pinks and rosy colors.
Right, and then and there's the Habranthus as well.
Yeah, Habranthus, and there's a slight technical differences about how the bloom shapes, but those do set seed. The Habranthus robustus is more of a pink, big seed pods, and you'll find some native rain lilies that set a lot of seed, and we were talking about it. 2 weeks after they bloom, just go out there and
collect the seed.
Yeah.
It happens pretty quickly. They
Yeah.
dry out, and as soon as you start to see the dry black seeds, you can start to collect them and spread them around. They do that happily.
Yep.
Chris, people can be in touch with you at southernbulbs.com.
Yes.
And you're out still in your little red cabin in the East Texas piney woods.
I am, and it's been hard to farm, so we have other people farming, and I'm traveling a lot. Like, I'm catching the train to New Orleans this afternoon.
Well, I hope folks will catch you at southernbulbs.com and pick up some of these fabulous plants for our summer gardens. And always a pleasure to have you here in Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, and coming up next, it's our friend Daphne Richards.